So, fun fact, there is this kind of weird culty thing about people who work in higher education. It's like you can only ever really understand higher education professionals if you've worked in higher education. And as luck would have it, I worked in higher education for about 10 years. I actually started off as an admissions counselor. It was my first job right out of college. And actually being an admissions counselor when you're just getting out of college is actually a really fun job to have, because back before the times of COVID, I have no idea how they're doing it now. You got to travel around the country doing college fairs, and all sorts of like young admissions counselors would be doing these college fairs, which inevitably led to you hanging out with them and partying with them and drinking with them and all that good stuff. Is kind of like this little fraternity or sorority of people who are all doing very similar work at all these different types of schools. You understood each other. You spoke the same language. In fact, fun fact, a lot of people actually end up meeting their future husbands or wives on the college fair circuit, including my younger brother. But that is a whole different story for a whole different day. So I worked in admissions for several years. I also I left admissions and then I worked in a fundraising arm for a college. I also worked in marketing arms for colleges. I worked for vendors who were consulting with colleges. I've consulted with college presidents of all different varieties. And I tell you this because when I saw this tweet from Mark Perry yesterday talking about the amount of money that the Ohio State University is spending on diversity professionals, my jaw dropped at this. This is insane. You see, like when I worked in higher education, I started in higher education in 2003. I worked in it. I worked for colleges up until like 2012, the very beginning of 2012. So it was kind of before all the woke nonsense was really starting to get out there. I worked as a vendor consulting for a couple more years after that. But really, I was not on campus working when all of the woke nonsense was starting to take hold on campuses. And so this was simply not part of my experience working for colleges. But oh my God, this is look at this list. And we're going to go through this list and talk about it, but just do a quick glance at the amount of diversity professionals at one college. One. The Ohio State University. So we're going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about why it's problematic that Ohio State is spending so much of their tuition dollars on these diversity professionals. But before we get into that, folks, just real quick, I need your help in growing the channel. Now, YouTube lately has been cracking down on a lot of channels that are like mine. I am by far the only person that is experiencing this. Lots of other people are talking about it. But the reality is this. They've made it really, really hard for my channel to grow. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, I'm going to ask you to hit that little red subscribe button down below. It really, really helps me out. Other things you can do are make sure you're hitting that thumbs up. Apparently that makes it more likely that YouTube's going to recommend my content if I post it. You can turn on notifications, leave a comment, all that good stuff. I greatly appreciate it. All right. Let's talk about this list because listen, guys, like this is an insane list, and let's even start at the bottom because that's actually the people I have the most sympathy for. Look at all these positions. They have academic encouragers in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And these people are only making $28,000, $29,000, $30,000 a year. So these are really low level workers. I mean, I almost even wonder if this is like a part-time job, but what in the holy hell is an academic encourager? Is it like an advisor, someone that's like coaching them? I don't understand. And if that's really that position that's that important, then why are we only paying them $28,000 a year when some of your diversity professionals are making over $250,000 a year? Oh my God, that alone really, really creeps me out. So it looks like we've got diversity. We've got a really big office of diversity and inclusion, but then they've got all these satellite offices. So their College of Engineering apparently has their own separate office of diversity and inclusion. If we come up here, actually the highest paid diversity and inclusion person on campus isn't even for just the main campus. It's for specifically the College of Engineering. The chief diversity officer for diversity, outreach, and inclusion in the College of Engineering makes $280,000 a year. And that's just their salary. That does not include, I don't believe, the 30% in benefits. So the average employee, if you take their annual salary, they usually make about 30% additional in benefits for health coverage and other sort of things. This salary, I don't even believe, includes this extra benefit. So this is $280,000 for one diversity professional. We've also got the associate vice president, talent and development and leadership, $255,000, vice provost for office of diversity and inclusion. Oh, look, they also have an institution equity office, which is apparently different than the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and the director of the Institutional Equity Office makes $150,000 a year. How about, let's see, talent, diversity, and leadership. So this talent, diversity, and leadership office is even a different office than the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and a different office than the Institutional Equity Office. I'm going to bet that talent, diversity, and leadership has to do with HR, but then why aren't they just calling it human resources? Because we got down here, we have the diversity and inclusion advisor in the talent management office, which apparently is different than the office of talent, diversity, and leadership. Are you guys following along here? Because this is absolute insanity. This is a cluster F of red tape and just people doing the same jobs in different areas around campus. Why do they need all these offices? Look at this, Fisher College of Business Diversity. Oh my God. Do they have, Fisher College, there was a missing comma. This is what got me. Because I was reading this as Fisher College of Business Diversity and Inclusion, but what it should be is Fisher College of Business, comma, Diversity and Inclusion. So there's another specific diversity and inclusion program within the colleges. We also have this College of Program Managers for Office of Equity and Inclusion within the College of Food, Agriculture, Environment. This is a nutty list. If you want to go through this list, I'm going to link it in the description below, but I also want to talk about why this is actually a problem. So let's go over to the Ohio State University website, and the is very important. I know people that work at Ohio State. I'm sure they're thrilled with me for this video, but I happen to know that they've done entire branding initiatives around the. They really have. They even have a t-shirt that says the. They make a big deal out of the. So we have to say the Ohio State University when we're talking about them. Now, one of the things I found is if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, this is usually where you can kind of tell what the hierarchy is, and they have got look at under administration. What's the very first thing? Diversity. So obviously they're putting a big emphasis on this. It might also just be because this might be in alphabetical order. I'm not entirely sure, but I clicked on that diversity section for you, and you'll see it's got all this stuff that they're doing around diversity. Now, I don't think this is fundamentally bad. Listen, I think one of the problems in this whole discussion around investments in different diversity and equity initiatives, because equity is different than equality. We've covered that before. But I don't actually think that diversity is a bad thing. I think that we should be striving for diverse, welcoming environments that are actually welcome to anyone. But you know what's funny? And the one thing I want to point out here, Student Life Multicultural Center. So apparently they have this Student Life Multicultural Center offers resources to all members of the Ohio State community while supporting and celebrating specific groups like African Americans, American Indians, Asians, Latinos, LGBTQ, women, men, and faith communities. Now, you know why this is interesting? Because all of these have links to them, links where you can go find more information about the Women's Initiative or the LGBTQ Initiative. You know the two groups that don't have links? Men and faith communities. So what are you really doing for them, Ohio State? I mean, really, why are they on the list if they don't have links? But that is actually the least of my concerns here. The next thing I did was I went over to the undergraduate admissions section, which is where you always want to go if you're looking for information about a college. Traditionally, the admissions sections are usually the most built out sections. And one of the things that their admissions section reminded me of is they've got a whole section on the value of investing in an education at the Ohio State University. And as a part of that value, they emphasize their land grant mission. Aha! What is a land grant mission, you ask? Well, the Ohio State University is a land grant university. And I actually think this is particularly relevant for our discussion here. What is a land grant university? Well, we're going to do some Wikipedia scholarship. A land grant university, also called land grant college or land grant institution, is an institution of higher education in the United States designated by a state to receive the benefits of the Morrill Acts of 1862 and 1890. signed by Abraham Lincoln, the first Morrill Act began to fund educational institutions by granting federally controlled lands to the states for them to sell, to raise funds, to establish and endow land-grant colleges, which is what the Ohio State University is. The mission of these institutions, as set forth by the 1862 Act, is to focus on the teaching of, wait for it, practical agricultural science, military science, and engineering, though without excluding classical studies, as a response to the Industrial Revolution and changing social class. The mission was in contrast to the historic practice of higher education to focus on a liberal arts curriculum. In other words, the purpose of land-grant universities, colleges, whatever, is to teach practical things in the real world. That is their literal purpose. That is why the land was given to them in the first place. And here we have Ohio State University investing in a boat ton of diversity programs, and it seems even just like a basic cursory glance of this list will tell you that there's overlap in these positions. The office names literally sound exactly the flipping same. I have no problem believing at all that many of these people are doing the exact same job and probably are even infighting with each other about who's in charge of that specific job because of the bloat of the administration when it comes to all of these different programs. This is absolutely insane. But it gets even more insane when we think about how much Ohio State University costs. So let's do a little game called Fun with Math, okay? So we have here, now of course, Ohio State, I'm sorry, I keep screwing this up. The Ohio State University is a public university, which means it's going to have different costs for in-state students than for out-of-state students. But we're going to go with the non-resident cost, which is actually kind of generous in this case, and we're going to see that. So the non-resident cost of anyone coming in from outside Ohio to attend this university is going to be $33,500 just for tuition. Just for tuition. That does not include the $13,000 room and board on top of it. Now let's play a little game called Fun with Math. I have my handy dandy calculator right here. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to this list of all the different jobs that Mark has compiled, and we're going to go down here to total payroll. This is the total salaries of all of these different diversity positions rolled up into one. So total payroll for, and I'm going to actually be generous here. I'm not even going to, well, no, you know what? I am going to include the benefits because those are still things that the Ohio State University needs to pay. So we're going to go with the $10 million figures. The Ohio State University is spending $10,161,987 in total compensation over all of these diversity initiatives. Now, the tuition, let's just do tuition. The tuition for non-residents, we're going to divide this 10 million number by that. 33,502 equals the cost of all those diversity positions is the same cost as 300 out-of-state students paying tuition. Same cost as those 300 out-of-state students. But let's actually be kind and generous here, and let's look at how many in-state students they need to pay for those positions. So we have our 10,161,987 for the total costs of those diversity positions, and this time we're going to look at just what a single in-state student, how many in-state students they need to pay for all of those positions. So we're going to divide that by 11,518, the cost of an in-state student. 882. The Ohio State University is taking just the tuition, not the room and board, because that pays for their room and board, just the tuition of 882 in-state students and using it to pay for a metric F-ton of diversity and inclusion professionals doing all sorts of different diversity and inclusion things. Now, I would, does anyone else see a problem with this? I don't know, man. I don't know. Listen, higher education is kind of famous for, they don't really like to fire people. They don't really like to restructure. They'll do it, but they really don't like to do it because it causes PR problems in campus and all sorts of like college presidents are generally in pretty unstable positions. They can be voted out by the faculty like right quick, which is probably why The Ohio State University is making investments like this, because of course the faculty member are going to want to see this and the president's going to want to get up and say, look at all of these nice diversity and inclusion and equity professionals that we've hired to the cost of 882 in-state students. I don't know, man. I just think this is interesting. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens to higher education over the next decade or so, because, listen, there are competitive colleges and universities in the country, but there really aren't that many of them. Like, whenever you're looking at, like, acceptance rates and schools having low acceptance rates, like, if you've got a kid that's planning on applying to college, first off, I'm sorry. But secondly, you don't really need to worry because the vast majority of colleges out there are hyper competitive, not in terms of admission, but in terms of the other colleges that they're competing with for those students. So it's really not that hard to get into most colleges, and you can really, never be afraid to leverage financial aid packages from other colleges to go back to the one that your student really wants to go to and say, XYZ school is offering us this, what are you going to do? Because chances are they will come back to you with a better offer, because it's not hyper competitive in terms of getting into the school. It is hyper competitive over who is ultimately going to win those students, and just always keep that in mind. I really hope we get to a place where, I don't even know how we would start reforming higher ed at this rate. I think it's like almost an impossible task to do. Listen, I've worked with college presidents. It's like most of them are more scared of getting fired than they are actually doing the right thing by their students, or they've honestly just convinced themselves that this is the right thing, which is mind-boggling to me, but here it is. Until our society fundamentally changes on this issue, you're going to have places like the Ohio State University spending the tuition of almost 900 in-state students, 300 out-of-state students, to pay for a big, long list of professionals who are, I'm going to bet they can't really back up what they're getting for that investment. Whatever. Not my tuition money that's going there, I'll tell you that. All right, folks, that's all I've got for this video. I'll see you soon.